Imagine this. A man is insulted in public. His pride burns, his chest tightens, and his hands tremble ever so slightly. Every instinct inside him screams to react, to shout back, to prove his dominance, to win that moment. But the one who truly holds power doesn't move. He doesn't flinch. He looks at his enemy, smiles faintly, and turns away. The crowd sees composure, but what they don't realize is that he just won a war without raising a finger. Because emotional control is not about suppressing your feelings. It's about mastering them so completely that they serve your strategy, not sabotage it. Machiavelli would say that the moment you lose control of your emotions, you lose control of your power. A person who cannot govern themselves cannot govern anything else. It's not your enemies who destroy you. It's your reaction to them, and that's where self-mastery begins. Not in learning new tricks or tactics, but in learning to silence that first impulsive wave inside you. See, people often mistake emotional control for coldness. They think it means feeling nothing. But Machiavellian mastery isn't about becoming a stone. It's about knowing when to feel deeply and when to appear indifferent. It's about turning emotion into an instrument. Think of anger, for instance. When anger controls you, it's destructive. But when you control anger, it becomes energy, focused, precise, and terrifyingly effective. Most people are emotional slaves. They react instantly to the smallest provocation. Someone cuts them off in traffic and they're boiling. Someone disagrees online and they're typing, like their life depends on it. Machiavelli understood that society rewards those who can appear calm when others lose their minds. Because in chaos, the one who looks composed becomes the one everyone follows. But emotional control isn't just about what others see. It's an internal game first. You must train yourself to notice the exact second your emotion starts to rise. That split second is your battlefield. When someone disrespects you, your brain floods with chemicals, anger, shame, fear of losing face. Your primitive mind demands revenge. But power comes when you learn to pause right there. When you can look at that emotion like a scientist, not a victim. What's happening here? Why does this make me feel weak? That's where self-mastery begins. In turning emotion into data, you must become your own observer. When you're humiliated, ask yourself, not how do I make them pay, but why does this touch me so deeply? When you're jealous, not how do I outshine them, but what in me feels threatened by their success? Machiavelli's brilliance lies not just in strategy toward others, but in strategy toward the self. To rule yourself, you must understand the machinery inside you. Now think about how easily people can be manipulated when they can't control their emotions. Politicians, marketers, leaders, they all play one simple game. Provoke emotion to control behavior. Fear sells. Outrage spreads. Validation enslaves. The masses don't think, they feel, and then they call it thought. Machiavellian mastery is the reversal of that cycle. You stop being the one controlled by emotional triggers and you start seeing them as signals to exploit or resist. When you're angry, people can read you. When you're sad, they can use sympathy against you. When you're desperate, they can predict you. The emotionally reactive person is an open book. But when you learn to hold emotion without displaying it, people grow uncertain. They don't know what you're thinking, what you might do next. And that uncertainty gives you leverage. That's why Machiavelli often emphasized the importance of appearing one way while being another. Control over appearance is the extension of control over emotion. If you can appear calm while your blood burns, appear compassionate while you're calculating, or appear disinterested while you're observing, then you've crossed into the realm of true mastery. You've stopped being a player moved by emotion and become the strategist who moves others through theirs. But let's be real. Emotional control isn't something you wake up with one day. It's forged in discomfort. You build it every time you resist the urge to prove yourself, to react, to defend. Self-mastery grows in silence, in restraint. In that moment you want to speak but don't. When you learn to watch the wave of emotion rise and fall without acting on it, you're rewiring your mind for power. And the truth is, your emotions aren't the enemy. They're the messengers of your deeper patterns. When you feel rage, it's pointing to a fear of powerlessness. When you feel jealousy, it's pointing to where you've abandoned your own potential. When you feel sadness, it's often a call for realignment, not weakness. Machiavellian wisdom isn't about killing emotion. It's about decoding it. Let's break this down in practice. Imagine you walk into a room and someone mocks you, subtle or direct. The ordinary mind feels insulted. The ego screams to respond, to restore balance. But the Machiavellian mind sees something else, a test, a mirror, a chance to observe how fragile the ego still is. The emotionally reactive person fails right there because they give away their state of mind. They become readable, predictable, But when you smile faintly instead, when you say nothing but your eyes remain steady, that's unsettling. It sends a message that you're not a surface-level creature. You live beneath it. And people instinctively respect that depth even if they don't understand why. Power in silence, however, isn't about passivity. It's about dominance through self-possession. You don't fight every battle. You let others expose their lack of control while you conserve yours. That's why those who talk less, react less, and reveal less are often assumed to know more than they do. Mystery amplifies presence, and emotional control is the root of mystery. You can't always tell who has mastered themselves by how little external chaos affects them. When someone with emotional control is insulted, they don't flinch. When they're praised, they don't melt. When they lose something valuable, they observe their own pain. But don't drown in it. That doesn't mean they don't feel. It means they refuse to be enslaved by what they feel. In fact, one of the most dangerous illusions people live under is that expressing every emotion equals authenticity. That's not authenticity. That's dependency. Because what you're really saying is, I can't hold what I feel unless someone sees it. But self-mastery means you can hold an entire storm inside you without needing the world to validate it. It means your emotions exist for you, not for public display. And here's the paradox. Once you stop being controlled by your emotions, you become infinitely more capable of using them. Anger becomes charisma. Fear becomes foresight. Sadness becomes depth. Because instead of emotions hijacking you, you channel them like an artist. You use the colors of human experience intentionally, not impulsively. Now ask yourself, how many of your worst decisions came from emotion, not logic? How many times did you speak too soon, trust too quickly, or quit too early because you couldn't stand the emotional discomfort? Machiavelli would say, most people's downfall isn't external. It's their inability to tolerate internal chaos. If you can remain calm when your heart is screaming, you are already rare. If you can plan while others panic, you are already powerful. And this doesn't just apply to conflict. It applies to love, ambition, failure. The one who can remain emotionally grounded when rejected, when ignored, when betrayed, becomes unstoppable because they've removed the one weapon others unconsciously use against them: the ability to trigger them. That's why Machiavelli's greatest lesson on self-mastery can be summarized in one principle. Control your state and you control your fate. You may not always control events, but you can control your interpretation of them. And that is enough to turn any loss into wisdom, any pain into strength, any insult into composure. Because the world bends to those who can keep their center when everyone else is losing theirs. It's not an easy art, but those who commit to mastering it find a kind of freedom most people never taste. The freedom of not needing to react, the quiet power of choosing your response, the stillness that unnerves louder men. That is the essence of Machiavellian self-mastery. To remain unshaken in a shaking world, to be the calm eye inside every storm. Because the truth is, your emotions aren't meant to rule you. They're meant to reveal you. And once you understand that, once you can feel everything yet show nothing until it serves your purpose, you no longer live as a pawn of impulse. You live as the strategist of your own mind. And from that point on, no one can take your power because it no longer depends on anything outside of you. Emotional control also requires detachment, not from life, but from identification. Most people identify with their emotions. They say, I am angry, I am sad, I am afraid. They make the feeling their identity. But Machiavellian self-mastery begins when you realize you are not your emotions. You are the one observing them. The storm is real, but you are the sky it moves through. Once you grasp that, everything changes. Because when you're no longer the storm, you no longer fight it. You study it, and then you decide what to do with it. Machiavelli believed that the strongest rulers were those who could rise above their own temperament. He saw that the downfall of many powerful men wasn't caused by their enemies. It was caused by their inability to step outside themselves. A ruler consumed by passion or pride becomes predictable, and once predictable, he becomes vulnerable. You can't outsmart the world if you can't outsmart your own impulses. That's why you'll often see that those who seem emotionless aren't truly cold. They've simply learned not to make every emotion public. They feel deeply, but selectively. They've realized that emotion loses its strength when it leaks everywhere. So they conserve it. They hold it back, build pressure, and release it only when it serves a purpose. That's what makes their presence feel so controlled, even intimidating. It's not that they lack emotion. It's that they've domesticated it. But emotional control doesn't mean suppression either. Suppression creates pressure, and pressure eventually explodes. Machiavelli's form of mastery is awareness, not denial. It's knowing why something stirs you before deciding what to do about it. For example, if someone insults you and you instantly react, you've given them control. But if you feel that sting, acknowledge it and still choose your response. You've just proven power over yourself. That's how power builds through countless small victories in the invisible moments noon sees. Think of it this way. Emotional control is a game of energy conservation. Every outburst, every unnecessary argument, every complaint drains power. Machiavelli would say the wise conserve emotional energy like a general conserves troops. They don't waste them on meaningless skirmishes. They wait for decisive moments where that energy can create maximum effect. This is why the calm and calculating often outperform the passionate and reactive. They simply outlast them. And yet this discipline doesn't mean living a dull, emotionless life. Quite the opposite. When you master emotion, life actually becomes richer. You begin to see through illusions, your own and others. You stop mistaking temporary feelings for permanent truths. You can feel anger without becoming cruel. You can feel fear without becoming paralyzed. You can feel love without becoming blind. Because mastery doesn't remove emotion. It refines it. There's a hidden advantage here too. When you control your emotional reactions, people start projecting their assumptions onto you. They fill in the silence with their own fears or fantasies. You become unreadable, and unreadable people are powerful because uncertainty breeds fascination. People start wondering, what is he thinking? What does she feel? Why isn't this getting to them? And while they're busy guessing, you're busy planning. To cultivate this kind of control, you need what Machiavelli would call internal diplomacy. You must become both the ruler and the citizen of your own mind. When rage rises, negotiate with it. When envy whispers, listen to what it wants to teach you. When sadness lingers, treat it like an advisor, not an invader. The more you understand each emotion's language, the easier it becomes to command them. You're not suppressing your emotional army, you're leading it. One of the most underestimated truths about emotion is that it always seeks expression. If you don't express it consciously, it leaks unconsciously. It shows in your tone, your posture, your words, your decisions. Emotional control then is about giving each emotion the right outlet. Anger can fuel progress. Fear can sharpen caution. Desire can drive creation. But left unmanaged, all three can destroy. The same fire that forges can also consume. Machiavelli knew that most men burn from their own flames long before their enemies touch them. Let's bring this closer to real life. You're in a heated discussion and someone deliberately provokes you. The old you would have snapped, raised your voice, maybe said something you'd regret later. But self-mastery looks different. You feel the heat rise, but you let the silence linger. You observe their words, their tone, their motive. You realize they want to see you break composure. So you don't give it to them. You let their energy expend itself while yours remains still. That's not weakness. It's dominance of a higher order. Machiavelli would argue that every conflict has two layers, the visible and the psychological. The visible one is what people see, the argument, the exchange, the noise, but the psychological one decides who truly wins. The one who remains emotionally controlled always holds the psychological high ground. They decide when the conversation ends, when it escalates, when it resolves. They're not reacting. They're orchestrating. And you'll notice once you begin mastering emotion, your perception of power changes. You stop chasing it. You stop needing validation or revenge. You start realizing that most power in this world comes not from control over others, but from control over yourself in front of others. That's the quiet revolution Machiavelli points toward. It's not about appearing powerful. It's about becoming immovable from within. The irony is people will often misinterpret your calmness. They'll call you detached, arrogant, even emotionless. That's fine. Let them. Because what they call detachment is simply your refusal to dance to their emotional tune. You've stopped being a puppet of impulse. And to those who still are, that looks unnatural. But in truth, it's the next stage of evolution, the shift from being driven by emotion to driving with it. Eventually, you'll notice a strange peace forming inside you. The same events that once triggered you barely shake you anymore. Not because you don't care, but because you've seen the pattern. You've seen how temporary emotions try to trick you into permanent decisions. You've learned to wait them out. You know that behind every emotional wave, clarity eventually follows. That patience is the mark of mastery. And once you reach that stage, something even deeper happens. You stop fearing emotion itself. You stop labeling them as good or bad, strong or weak. They're just signals. You stop chasing happiness or avoiding anger. You see both as parts of the same mechanism, the pulse of being human. Machiavelli's form of self-mastery isn't about becoming a god. It's about mastering humanity so you can use it wisely. Their art lies in balance. Too much control and you become rigid. Too little and you become reckless. The mastery Machiavelli speaks of is fluid. It adjusts to the moment. You can be soft without being weak, decisive without being cruel, calm without being indifferent. Emotional control doesn't erase emotion. It teaches it how to bow to reason. So next time you feel overwhelmed by anger, jealousy, sadness, don't fight it. Observe it, name it, ask it what it wants. Then decide if that serves your greater strategy. Because that's the difference between being emotional and being powerful. The emotional man acts first and regrets later. The powerful man understands first and acts when it counts. And this practice isn't just for power in politics or relationships. It's for life itself. When you can hold stillness inside chaos, when you can feel deeply without drowning, when you can stand in fire and not burn, you become the kind of person Machiavelli wrote about, the one who bends the world by mastering himself first. The world will always try to provoke you through insult, temptation, fear, desire. But remember this, control is contagious. When others see you calm in the face of provocation, they adjust to your rhythm. You set the emotional tone of the environment. That's how quiet dominance works. The one who controls emotion controls the room. The one who controls the room controls the outcome. And Theon who controls himself controls all. Here's the final secret of emotional control most people never grasp. It's not about winning every internal battle. It's about knowing which ones are worth fighting. There are emotions that deserve to be felt, to be honored, to be lived through. And then there are emotions that exist only to distract you, to bait you into wasting energy on things that don't move your life forward. Machiavelli's genius wasn't in being emotionless. It was in discrimination. He could tell which emotions sharpened his judgment and which ones dulled it. The true master learns this difference over time. Every emotion carries a cost. Anger costs clarity. Envy costs gratitude. Fear costs opportunity. And yet, if used strategically, each of those same emotions can also become a tool. Anger can expose where your boundaries are being crossed. Envy can highlight the potential you've been ignoring. Fear can reveal where growth is waiting. The key isn't to erase emotion. It's to use its information without letting it hijack your execution. Most people's emotions own them because they've never taken time to observe their emotional cycles. Notice how they repeat, how the same things trigger you again and again. The same patterns of anger, the same disappointments, the same insecurity, wrapped in new situations. That repetition isn't bad luck. It's programming, and until you break that pattern by recognizing it in real time, it will keep running your life. Machiavelli's form of self-mastery is reprogramming through awareness. Once you can name your emotional pattern, you no longer obey it. Now let's talk about control in motion. Because emotional control isn't built in meditation rooms or theory. It's built in friction. When someone provokes you, when things fall apart, when you're embarrassed or rejected, that's when emotional mastery is forged. Every emotional surge is a weight, and your ability to stay centered under that weight determines your strength. The heavier the emotion you can hold without reacting, the more power you have. Machiavelli would remind you that emotion is contagious. The one who remains calm in chaos becomes the anchor everyone subconsciously looks toward in meetings, in crisis, in arguments. If you can control your tone, your breathing, your pace of speech, you start controlling others without them realizing it. Because emotion seeks equilibrium. People want to match the emotional energy of the most grounded person in the room. That's leadership without words. But here's where self-mastery reaches its highest level, using emotion as performance. The Machiavellian doesn't just control emotion internally, he learns to display emotion strategically. If showing anger intimidates, he uses it. If showing empathy disarms, he uses that too. It's not deception, it's precision. Because mastery of emotion doesn't mean you never act emotional. It means your emotions always serve your outcome. You can raise your voice without losing control. Smile without sincerity if it achieves peace, or show vulnerability to gain trust, all while staying rooted in self-awareness. This level of control unnerves people. They sense you feel deeply, yet they can't tell what truly affects you. They'll test you, trying to see if they can make you react, make you flinch, make you crack. But when you hold your line, when you remain consistent no matter what emotional bait they throw, something shifts. They start respecting you in ways they can't articulate. Because humans instinctively bow to those who cannot be easily moved. That's why in Machiavellian philosophy, emotional control isn't just self-defense, it's offense. You don't just protect yourself from being manipulated. You begin to read others through their emotions. Every outburst, every hesitation, every sigh becomes data. When people lose emotional control, they reveal their weaknesses. Their needs, fears, and insecurities spill out. And if you're calm enough to listen between their words, you'll see their entire strategy unfold before they realize they've exposed it. But this awareness comes with responsibility, because the temptation to use emotional insight for cruelty is strong, And Machiavellian mastery without morality becomes emptiness, dressed as wisdom. Control means nothing if it disconnects you from your humanity. The goal is to rule yourself, not erase yourself. A cold strategist without emotional intelligence isn't powerful. He's hollow. Power is not found in eliminating emotion, but in transcending it while still being able to connect, influence, and feel when it serves truth. So emotional control is not the art of detachment. It's the art of alignment. Aligning what you feel with what you aim for. When your emotions move in the same direction as your purpose, you become unstoppable. There's no internal friction, no wasted energy, no mental noise. Every feeling becomes fuel. Even pain, especially pain. Because pain is information, it tells you what you still care about, what still controls you, and where you still have room to evolve. Here's the paradox Machiavelli would appreciate. Control doesn't make you rigid. It makes you fluid. You don't cling to fixed emotional identities anymore. You don't label yourself as confident, stoic, fearless, or kind. You simply become adaptable. One day silent, one day expressive, one day firm, one day forgiving, whatever the situation demands. That's the real sophistication of self-mastery. You become unpredictable not because you're inconsistent, but because you're responsive only to truth, not emotion. When you reach that point, your presence begins to change. People sense something about you they can't explain. It's not charisma in the usual sense. It's steadiness. They feel safe around you or intimidated by you, depending on who they are. Your calm exposes their chaos. Your patience reveals their impatience. That's how control radiates. It doesn't need to announce itself. It simply is. Eventually, you stop trying to control emotion and start dancing with it. You allow it to flow through you, but you never drown in it. Anger passes through without burning you. Fear passes through without freezing you. Love passes through without blinding you. You begin to experience life more fully, yet act more wisely. That's the balance most never find. Feeling everything but being owned by nothing. That's what Machiavelli's guide to self-mastery truly points toward. Not a heartless existence, but an elevated one. The kind of life where no insult, no rejection, no chaos can throw you off your center. Where your mood no longer depends on others' behavior. Where your sense of self is so rooted that you don't need to prove it. You observe, you adapt, you act, but you never react. And when you get there, when you truly master this art, the world starts playing by your rhythm. Because people who cannot control their emotions will always orbit around those who can. They'll seek your calm when they're lost, your certainty when they're afraid, your presence when they're chaotic. And that's the silent power Machiavelli understood best. The kind that doesn't need to be shown, only felt. Emotional control isn't the end of emotion. It's the beginning of power. Not the kind that conquers others, but the kind that conquers chaos. The power to move through life untouched by manipulation, unmoved by flattery, and unbroken by failure. The power to feel everything yet remain master of yourself. Because when you master your emotions, you don't just gain control, you gain freedom. The rarest kind there,